She kept the secret for over 60 years. Through every interview and every camera pointed at her face, Ann-Margret smiled and deflected. She said just enough to satisfy the room, but not a single word more. Everyone assumed she was protecting herself, but she was protecting him. What she knew about Elvis Presley was too raw, too dangerous, and too real to speak out loud. Now, at 84 years old, the silence is finally breaking. The woman who knew Elvis better than anyone alive is revealing a truth that shatters the image of the posters, the jumpsuits, and the curled lips. Because the Elvis the world loved and the man she knew alone in the dark were completely different.
So if you pointed out weaknesses that you knew that were, because all of us have them, and if we have a love relationship, then we certainly know about them.
Ann-Margret and Elvis meet. On set here is where we begin. Not with romance or the heartbreak, not with the funeral in Memphis where she showed up and the whole world watched. We begin in a recording studio, Santa Monica Boulevard, July of 1963. Two of the biggest stars in America are standing in the same room for only the second time in their lives. A microphone between them, sheet music in their hands. And the moment they open their mouths to sing together, every single person in that room stops what they are doing. The engineers, musicians, and the producers. Everyone goes still, because what is happening in front of them is not rehearsed. It is not manufactured. It is not the kind of thing you can plan in a boardroom or manufacture on a studio lot. It is electricity, pure and undeniable. And here's the question nobody thought to ask at the time. How did two people who had barely spoken a full sentence to each other already sound like they had been singing together their entire lives? That answer tells you everything about who Elvis Presley really was, and why Ann-Margret was the only person who ever truly got close enough to see it. Ann-Margret Olsen did not arrive in Hollywood with a manufactured story. She was born in Valsjöben, Sweden, a small town close to the Arctic Circle. Lumberjacks, farmers, cold winters and quiet summers. Her father, Gustav, had worked in America during the war years and brought the family over in 1946. She grew up in Illinois, church-going, private, intensely family-oriented. She was not raised to be a star. She became one anyway. By the time she was 22, she had already earned a Golden Globe nomination, lit up Broadway, and earned a reputation as one of the most explosive live performers in the business. The press struggled to describe her. She was too sexy for one label, too talented for another, too unpredictable to fit any box they had. So they reached for the easiest comparison available. They called her the female Elvis. She had not even seen him perform yet. When Viva Las Vegas went into production, the studio knew it was a gamble. Colonel Tom Parker had spent years making sure no leading lady ever upstaged his client. The formula was simple. Elvis was the center of every film. The women were decoration. Attractive, present, forgettable. Ann-Margret was not forgettable. Producer Jack Cummings and director George Sidney pushed hard for her. Parker was skeptical. He had reason to be. Putting two forces of nature in the same film was not a controlled experiment. Nobody could predict what would come out the other side. They moved forward anyway. The first meeting was formal, brief. A photographer took some shots. Polite phrases were exchanged. Nothing dramatic happened in front of the cameras. But Ann-Margret noticed something small, something that most people would have missed entirely. Elvis Presley was nervous. Not nervous the way a man is nervous before a big performance. Nervous the way a man is nervous when he is standing in front of someone who might actually see through him. She wrote about it later. She said she realized immediately that he was as shy and ill at ease meeting new people as she was. Shy. That word stopped her cold, because she had spent years hiding that exact same thing, burying it beneath the performing, beneath the dancing and the smiling and the enormous stage presence that filled every room she walked into. She recognized the hiding because she had been doing it herself. Now here is the first thing to understand about who Elvis really was. The shyness was not a performance. It was not false modesty. It was not the polished humility of a man who had been trained by a publicist. It was real, and it pointed to something much deeper. Elvis Presley had grown up with nothing. Tupelo, Mississippi, a two-room house, a mother who loved him completely, and a world that largely did not notice him at all. He went from invisible to the most famous person on the planet so fast that he never had time to build the internal architecture that kind of fame requires. He became Elvis Presley before he fully knew who Elvis Presley was. And that gap between the icon the world demanded and the man underneath never closed. Not in 1956 when the girls started screaming, or in 1963 on that soundstage. It never closed. The people around him, the Memphis Mafia, the handlers, and the Colonel managed the icon. They kept the machine running. Nobody managed the man. Except, for one brief and extraordinary period, Ann-Margret. Back to that recording studio. They are singing The Lady Loves Me, a playful back and forth, flirtatious, easy. The kind of chemistry you either have or you do not. They had it. Elvis's right-hand man, Joe Esposito, watched the whole thing from the side of the room. Later, when Elvis asked him what was so special about her, Esposito kept his answer simple. They were the same person. That was it. That was the whole answer. Two people from modest backgrounds who had become enormous. Two people who were shy in private and incandescent in public, who loved their parents fiercely. Two people who only felt fully free when the music was running through them. Ann-Margret wrote that they were soulmates, shy on the outside, unbridled within. She was not being poetic, she was being precise. And this is where the real story begins. Because as the weeks on set continued, Elvis started doing something he almost never did. He started asking to be alone with her, away from the entourage and the noise, away from every person whose job it was to be near him at all times, just the two of them. She wrote that the first time it happened, she knew she had crossed into uncharted territory, but the more frequently it happened, the more it meant. Because Elvis Presley did not trust easily. He did not open doors easily. He did not let people in. He was letting her in, and what she found on the other side of that door was not the king of rock and roll. It was a man who was searching, quietly, desperately, for something the fame had never been able to give him. What was he searching for? And did he ever find it? That answer is coming. But first, you need to understand what happened when the cameras stopped rolling and the two of them drove up into the Hollywood Hills alone. Because that is where Elvis showed her the version of himself that the world never got to see. And that is the version Ann-Margret has been protecting all these years. The love nobody was supposed to know about. Picture this: Graceland, 1964. Priscilla Beaulieu is standing in the middle of a room, shaking. Not from the cold or fear, from rage. She has just read something in the newspaper, a headline, a few words printed in black ink that have shattered something inside her. She picks up a flower vase and hurls it across the room. It explodes against the wall. She screams. She says she hates Margaret. She wants her gone, back to Sweden, out of his life, out of everything. And Elvis Presley stands there, calm, measured, and says something that stops Priscilla cold. He says he wants a woman who will understand that things like this might just happen. He asks her, quietly, "Are you gonna be that woman?" Priscilla says no. Now, here is the question you need to be sitting with. What exactly did that headline say? And how did it get there in the first place? That story starts months earlier, in the desert heat of a Las Vegas film set. And it starts with two people who were falling in love and had absolutely no plan for what came next. By the time filming on Viva Las Vegas was deep into production, the professional had become personal. There was no single moment it crossed the line, no dramatic declaration, and there was no scene where someone said the words out loud. It just happened, slowly, then all at once. The motorcycle rides began first. Elvis loved motorcycles, and Margaret loved them too. So they rode out into the desert, away from the crew, away from the entourage. Just the two of them and the open road and the kind of silence that only exists when you are moving fast enough that the noise of your life cannot catch up with you. Then came the drives into the Hollywood Hills. They would park somewhere up high. The city stretched out below them like a field of scattered lights, and they would talk. Not about the film or their careers, not about the industry or the press or what Colonel Parker thought about the dailies. They talked about real things, fear, longing, faith, what it felt like to be this famous this fast, and still feel like something essential was missing. Elvis opened up to her in those hours the way he opened up to almost no one. And Ann-Margret received what he gave her with complete care. Here is what she learned about him in those quiet hours. The first thing, Elvis never got over losing his mother. Gladys Presley died in August of 1958. Elvis was 23 years old. He had just been drafted into the Army. He was at the absolute beginning of what his life was going to become, and the one person who had believed in him completely, before any of it. Before the records, the screaming crowds, and the television appearances was gone. He grieved in a way that people around him described as almost unbearable to watch. He wept at the funeral. He talked to her. He did not want to leave the cemetery. Years later, he still carried it. Ann-Margret noticed that he spoke about his mother the way she spoke about her own parents, with a love that had no conditions attached to it. She had grown up the same way, family first, always. That was another thing they shared that nobody had given them. It was simply who they were. The second thing she learned. Elvis was consumed by spiritual questions, not in a casual way, not the way a famous person mentions God in an interview to seem relatable. Genuinely consumed. He read voraciously, the Bible, books on numerology, Eastern philosophy. He wanted to understand what happened after death, whether his talent was a gift he deserved or a burden he had been assigned without his consent, whether the life he was living was moving him closer to something meaningful or pulling him further away from it. He prayed, questioned, and worried. Ann-Margret found that side of him startling because it contradicted everything the public image suggested. The king of rock and roll was not supposed to be lying awake at night wondering whether he was a good person, but he was. That was the real Elvis. Searching, restless, deeply, privately uncertain. And she was one of the only people he ever showed that to. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because while all of this was happening between them, another reality existed on the other side of the country. Priscilla Beaulieu was at Graceland, waiting. Elvis had told Ann-Margret about Priscilla early on. He was honest about it. He did not hide it. He said he was committed and could not walk away from that. For him, marriage was something he had already been moving toward, and yet, he kept calling and showing up. He kept choosing to be alone with Ann-Margret in the Hollywood Hills when the city went dark. This was not a casual attraction. The people closest to Elvis were watching it all unfold and saying things privately that they would only confirm publicly much later. Lamar Fike, one of Elvis's closest friends, put it plainly. He said Elvis's connection with Ann-Margret was not just an affair. He said Elvis was really in love with her. Cousin Billy Smith went further. He said that when it came to deciding who to build a life with, it was genuinely a toss-up between Priscilla and Ann-Margret, right down to the wire. That is not a footnote. That is the center of the story. So, what broke it? A single conversation with a journalist. 1964. Ann-Margret mentioned to a reporter that she and Elvis had been seeing each other. She was not announcing anything. She was not trying to force his hand. It was a brief, unguarded comment, the kind anyone might make without thinking through every consequence. The publication ran it as an engagement announcement. Elvis saw it, and something in him shut down. He felt exposed. He felt that something private and carefully guarded had been pulled out into the open without his permission. Whether the hurt was about the headline itself, or whether it was about the impossible choice the headline was forcing him to make publicly, that part Ann-Margret has never confirmed. But the result was immediate. He ended the romance. Just like that. No long conversation and no dramatic farewell. The thing between them simply stopped. And Priscilla at Graceland threw the vase and screamed and asked Elvis what she meant to him. And Elvis told her that he wanted a woman who would understand. She said she would not be that woman. 7 days after Elvis married Priscilla in May of 1967, Ann-Margret married actor Roger Smith. 7 days. Draw your own conclusions. But here is the thing about real love. It does not simply end because the relationship does. It transforms and finds another shape. It persists in ways that are quiet, inconsistent, and almost impossible to explain to someone who has not experienced it. What came next between Elvis and Ann-Margret was not bitterness. It was not silence. It was not the awkward distance of two people pretending a thing never happened. It was something rarer than the romance itself. And it would last until the night the flowers stopped arriving. What does that mean? You are about to find out. The friendship that outlasted everything Las Vegas. August of 1977. Ann-Margret is backstage before a show. The dressing room is bright, loud with the noise of preparation. People moving around her, adjusting, primping, checking lights and sound levels, and 100 other things that happen in the hour before a performer walks out onto a stage. She is getting ready, and then she looks around the room and stops. Something is wrong. Not with the sound or the lighting, not with anything anyone else in that room would notice. The flowers are not there. For over a decade, without a single exception, a guitar-shaped floral arrangement had arrived in her dressing room before every Las Vegas opening. There was no card with a full name or public announcement, just the flowers and the gesture, just the quiet, consistent proof that someone on the other side of the country had not forgotten. This time, nothing. She stood there in that bright, noisy room and felt something shift inside her. She already knew. Before the phone rang and the news broke across every television screen in America, before the world began to process what had just happened, Ann-Margret already knew that Elvis Presley was gone. How did they get here? How did two people who ended a romance in 1964 end up so deeply connected that she could feel his death in the silence of an empty dressing room 13 years later? Most people tell the Ann-Margret and Elvis story like it ends with the breakup. Romance begins on set and ends over a newspaper headline. Both parties marry other people. Story over. But that version leaves out the most remarkable part, what came after. Because what came after was not silence. It was not the polite distance of two former lovers who had agreed to pretend the past did not exist. It was not the occasional awkward run-in at an industry event. It was a friendship. Real, sustained, and deliberate. And in some ways, it was more honest than the romance had ever been. The guitar-shaped flowers started arriving not long after the split. Every time Ann-Margret opened a new engagement in Las Vegas, they appeared. No grand gesture, no public statement. Elvis did not take out an advertisement or call a press conference or find some way to make sure the world knew he had sent them. He just sent them, year after year, show after show. Think about what that means. A man at the absolute center of the entertainment universe is surrounded at all times by people managing his image, his schedule, and his every public move quietly, consistently, privately making sure that one specific woman knew he was thinking of her. Not because the cameras were rolling or because anyone was watching, because he meant it. Ann-Margret, for her part, kept showing up to his shows. She sat in his Las Vegas audiences in the early 1970s and watched him perform. And what she saw during those years was not the same man she had ridden motorcycles with in the desert. Something was changing. The voice was still there. The presence was still there. Elvis Presley on a stage was still one of the most compelling sights in the history of live performance. Nobody could take that from him, but she saw the weight. She saw the exhaustion underneath the energy. She saw the way the years of pressure and excess were beginning to show up in his face and his body, in ways that the jumpsuits and the stage lighting could not fully hide. She saw what was happening to him, and she said nothing publicly, because that was not who she was. Here is something that gets lost in the larger Elvis mythology. By the mid-1970s, the man was trapped, not by anyone evil, not by a single villain, trapped by the accumulated weight of 2 decades of being Elvis Presley. The Colonel's management decisions had kept him from touring internationally, from taking the serious dramatic roles he quietly craved, from evolving publicly in ways that might have saved him privately. He was locked into a version of himself that the public demanded, and that he was increasingly unable to sustain. The Memphis Mafia, the inner circle that had surrounded him since the beginning, insulated him from the outside world. That insulation had once felt like protection. By the 1970s, it felt more like a sealed room. Few people from outside that world were allowed to remain genuinely close to him. Ann-Margret was one of them. She did not push or make a demand. She did not try to fix what she could see was slowly breaking. She simply remained. And that, in Elvis Presley's life, was rarer than almost anything else anyone gave him. Now, here is a detail that most people walk right past. After Elvis died, Ann-Margret did not disappear from that world. She stayed close to Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, the man who had raised him in the side 2-room house in Tupelo and watched his son become something neither of them had language for, She maintained that friendship until Vernon's own death in 1979. 2 years after Elvis was gone, she was still showing up, still present, still honoring the connection. That is not the behavior of someone who had a fling on a movie set and moved on. That is the behavior of someone for whom that world and that family meant something permanent. The funeral is where everything becomes undeniable. August of 1977, Memphis. The whole world is watching. Ann-Margret came. She knew exactly what walking through those doors meant. She knew the cameras would find her face, knew every expression she made would be photographed, analyzed and printed alongside speculation about what she was feeling and what she had meant to him and what her presence there signified. She came anyway, because he had been real to her, and she owed him the dignity of showing up the way he had always, quietly, shown up for her. And here is the moment that reframes the entire triangle that the tabloids had spent years constructing. Priscilla was there. The two women, the ones the press had spent years positioning as rivals, as opposites, as competing claims on the same man, were in the same room, grieving the same loss. And by every account, there was no hostility between them. Priscilla recognized something in Ann-Margret's grief that went beyond performance, beyond public appearance, beyond anything that needed to be managed or explained. It was real, and Priscilla knew it was real. Two women, different lives, the same man, united in loss rather than divided by memory. The flowers tell the whole story. Think about it from the beginning. Elvis Presley was a man who gave compulsively. Cars, cash, jewelry. He gave to strangers and friends. He gave because giving was one of the only ways he felt in control of what his enormous wealth and fame were doing in the world. But the flowers he sent Ann-Margret were different. He did not give them to impress anyone. Nobody knew about them. There was no audience for the gesture or press release. No version of the story where sending guitar-shaped flowers to a woman who was married to someone else made him look good in any public way. He sent them because he wanted her to know that he remembered that what they had built in those desert rides and those late nights in the Hollywood Hills had not dissolved with time or distance or the choices they had each made to build lives with other people. It had remained quietly, faithfully, in the shape of flowers, until the night it didn't. And that night, August of 1977, standing in a dressing room in Las Vegas, with the noise of pre-show preparation all around her, Ann-Margret understood something she had perhaps always known. Some connections do not follow the rules that regular relationships follow. They do not end when the romance ends or fade when the years pile up. They do not require daily maintenance or public declaration or any of the conventional proof that a bond still exists. They simply persist, like music and memory, like a guitar-shaped arrangement of flowers. That arrives without explanation and means everything without a single word attached. Now you know what she was protecting. The question is, when she finally decided to stop protecting it and start telling the truth, what exactly did she say? That answer is next. What Ann-Margret finally revealed, 1994. A television studio, bright lights, two chairs facing each other. Charlie Rose leans forward. He has been building to this moment for the entire interview. The whole country has been building to this moment for 30 years. He asks the question directly. No softening and preamble. He asks Ann-Margret to tell him what her relationship with Elvis Presley really was. The room goes quiet. She does not flinch or look away. She does not laugh it off, redirect the conversation, or pretend she misheard the question. She looks at him steadily and says this. Our relationship was very strong, serious, and real. We were together for 1 year, and I do not want to betray his trust even in death. Then she stops. That was it. That was all she gave. And for another 30 years, the world accepted that answer because it had no choice. But here is what nobody asked at the time. Why was she still protecting him? Elvis Presley had been dead for 17 years. He could not be hurt by the truth. He could not be embarrassed by it. He could not lose anything because of it. So, who exactly was she protecting? That answer changes everything you think you know about this story. Ann-Margret was not protecting Elvis from scandal. She was protecting him from reduction. Because the world had already decided who Elvis Presley was. The icon and legend. The sequins, sideburns, Las Vegas residency, and the tragic ending that everyone saw, coming except the people who could have stopped it. That version of Elvis was everywhere. On posters, on coffee mugs, in impersonator shows on every strip of tourist real estate in America. And that version had almost nothing to do with the man she knew. She was not going to feed that machine. She was not going to hand over the private Elvis to be processed and packaged alongside everything else. So, she said just enough, and held the rest, for decades. But time changes the calculation. At 84, Ann-Margret has begun to speak with a specificity she never allowed herself before, not to rewrite history or to center herself in his legacy. It was not to settle scores with anyone still living, but because the man she knew deserved a more accurate portrait than the one the world had been carrying around. And she was running out of time to give it to him. So here's what she has finally said about who Elvis Presley really was. The first thing. He was nothing like the public image, not in private, not in those hours when the entourage was gone. And the noise had settled, and it was just the two of them, somewhere quiet in the dark. The man she knew was gentle, thoughtful, funny in a way that caught you off guard. He could fill a room with laughter and then sit in total silence for 20 minutes and not feel the need to fill it with anything. He was comfortable with stillness. That surprised her, because the Elvis the world demanded was always performing, always moving, always giving the crowd what it came for. The real Elvis was still. The second thing, he read, constantly. Not magazines, not scripts, books, philosophy, scripture. He was drawn to questions that had no clean answers. What happens after death? Whether the life a person lives on Earth carries weight in whatever comes next. Whether talent is a gift or a test. He had a copy of the Bible with him almost always, not as a prop or for the cameras. He marked passages. He returned to certain verses the way a person returns to a wound that is not fully healed. Ann-Margret recalled conversations with him about faith that surprised her, because they were not the conversations of a man who had found peace in his beliefs. They were the conversations of a man who was still searching, genuinely, quietly, sometimes desperately. That side of him never made it into any headline. She made sure of that. The third thing, he was terrified. Not of performing. Performing was the one place he was never afraid. The stage was where the gap between Elvis Presley the icon and Elvis Presley the man disappeared completely. Up there, they were the same person. But off the stage, the fear was real. He was afraid of disappointing people, afraid of the day the voice would change and the crowds would thin, and the thing that had rescued him from poverty and invisibility would decide it was finished with him. Afraid that without all of it, there would be nothing underneath worth knowing. Ann-Margret pushed back on that, privately, directly. She told him what she saw when the cameras were off. And the entourage had gone home was more interesting than anything he did on a stage. He did not fully believe her. That was the wound, right there. The man who had everything could not be convinced that he himself was enough. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977. He was 42 years old. Ann-Margret was in that Las Vegas dressing room, and she felt it before she was told, in the silence where the flowers should have been. She went on stage that night anyway, because that is what performers do. That is what Elvis had always done. You carry the thing that is breaking you, and you walk out into the light, and you give the crowd what it came for. She understood that better than almost anyone alive. She had learned it from him. She did not tell this story to make herself famous. She was already famous. She told it because Elvis Presley was a real man, complex, private, searching, and almost nobody who is still alive got close enough to know that. She did, and 60 years of silence was long enough. The world got the icon. She gave us something rarer. She gave us the truth. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves Elvis. Subscribe for more stories that go deeper than the headline. Because the real stories, the ones worth telling, are never the ones you already know.